My parents sold my 11-year-old daughter's antique cello, gifted to her by my grandmother, for $87,000 and used the money to buy a pool for my sister's kids. When Grandma heard, she didn't cry. She smiled and said, "That cello was..." My parents went pale. You know that moment when the air itself shifts and a cold dread washes over you, telling you something is horribly wrong, even before you see it? That's exactly how it felt the day my family stole my daughter's future and built a swimming pool with it. I could smell it, that sharp, chemical tang of fresh paint and sawdust. The kind of smell that screams renovation, but also, if you listen closely, whispers lie. It hung in the air long before we even pulled into my parents' driveway. Lucy, my 11-year-old, climbed out of the car, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her music binder and rosin tin feeling impossibly light. The important part, you see, was already inside. Her cello, the one that lived at my parents' house, in my grandma's old music room. Lived being the operative word I hadn't yet fully grasped. Lucy had been vibrating with excitement all day. Not in a yay chores way, but in a deep, this is mine kind of anticipation. She'd been humming under her breath in the car, tapping out rhythms on her knees, already half lost in that focused little world she disappears into when she plays. "Do you think great-grandma will be there today?" she asked, pulling her ponytail tighter as if she could control the universe with a hair elastic. "She's at her place now, sweetie," I said gently. "Not today. We'll call her later." Lucy nodded, but her eyes, those beautiful, hopeful eyes, still searched the house, as if my grandma might have had a change of heart overnight and come back, just because she missed the faint smell of my dad's aftershave and my mom's passive-aggressive sighs. We walked up to the front door. I had a key, not because I'm particularly trusted in my family, but because I'm useful. There's a stark difference. One gets you love, the other gets you access codes and errands. The second I pushed open that door, I heard it. A muffled whine of power tools somewhere in the background. And that smell? Definitely paint. Definitely money. Lucy's face lit up. "Are they fixing the music room?" I didn't answer right away. My brain was still doing that slow, dumb buffering thing it does when reality refuses to match the script. We stepped inside. A tarp covered the hallway runner like the house was preparing for surgery. Cardboard boxes, half-taped, lined the walls. Someone had used blue painter's tape to cordon off the entryway, which is the polite way of saying, "Don't touch anything, peasant." Lucy tiptoed like we were in a museum. "Mom," I called, loud enough to reach whatever part of the house my mother currently ruled from. No answer. Lucy, ever curious, headed straight for the back window. Whoa! I followed her gaze, and my stomach plummeted. The backyard looked excavated, like the earth had been peeled open and rearranged. A massive rectangle had been carved out where the grass used to be. Piles of dirt sat like small mountains. There were forms along the edges, rebar, stacks of pavers. It wasn't finished, but it was absolutely, aggressively not subtle. A pool. A full-on, in-ground swimming pool. Because why quietly improve your life when you can broadcast it to the entire neighborhood with heavy machinery? Lucy blinked. "Is that for us?" There was so much hope in her voice, so much pure, childlike expectation, that in that moment, I actually hated everyone I was related to. "I don't know," I said carefully, forcing the words out. "Let's go get your cello." We walked down the hall toward the music room, a space that had always been my grandma's territory, even when she lived with them. She turned it into a sanctuary. Temperature-controlled, a humidifier humming quietly in the corner, shelves of old sheet music, and a lock on the cabinet, because she wasn't born yesterday. Lucy loved it in there. She said it smelled like polish and peppermint tea. I used to say it smelled like someone who still believed in boundaries. I pushed open the door. The humidifier was still running. The music stand was still there. But the corner where the cello case always rested, where Lucy's cello rested like it belonged to her, was empty, not moved, not put away, just gone. Lucy didn't scream. She didn't even inhale. She just froze. Then, slowly, she walked to the corner, like she was approaching an animal that might bite. She looked down at the empty spot, looked up at the shelf, looked behind the chair, as if maybe it had fallen and no one had noticed for days. Then she turned to me. "Did great-grandma change her mind?" she asked, her voice small, careful, as if trying not to disturb the air. My throat tightened.
No.
Lucy swallowed hard. Then where is it? She didn't sound angry. That would have been easier. She sounded careful, like the question itself might get her into trouble. Her fingers drifted to the edge of the music stand, as if she expected to feel the cello there.
Would. Wait.
Something real. And when there was nothing, she pulled her hand back fast, like she'd touched a hot stove. Her eyes got glossy, but she didn't let anything fall. She just nodded once, too hard, like she was forcing the moment to behave. I didn't answer because I didn't know, not for sure, but I could already feel where this was heading, and I hated that my kid was standing in the middle of it. Midway subscribe line. By the way, if you're still with me, feeling that knot in your stomach, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable, infuriating, and eventually satisfying stories are definitely coming your way. Main story continued. I left Lucy in the music room. I needed her not to see my face when I found out. I marched toward the kitchen. My mom was there, of course. She was always in the kitchen when she wanted to look like she was holding the family together with her bare hands. She had a mug in one hand and her phone in the other, her hair pulled back like she'd been busy, which in my family usually means busy ignoring something. My dad sat at the table, scrolling on his tablet, calm as a man who believes the world will always make room for him. My sister Rachel was perched on a stool, sipping something green and expensive looking. She didn't even look up when I walked in. She rarely ever did. Where's Lucy's cello?
I asked.
My mom blinked slowly, like she was genuinely confused why I'd bring up something so inconvenient during her morning coffee. Good morning to you, too, Emily, she said, saccharine sweet. I just stared at her. My dad sighed. What's the problem now? I could feel my heart doing that annoying thing where it tries to climb out of my chest and find a quieter family. Lucy's cello, I repeated. Where is it? Rachel snorted, still not looking up. Oh, please. My mom took a delicate sip of her coffee. Your father handled it. Handled it. That phrase is like a red flag printed in cursive. Handled it how? I demanded. My dad finally looked up, annoyance etched on his face. We sold it. The room went strangely quiet, like the house itself wanted to hear what happened next. I blinked. You sold it? Yes. My dad said, as if explaining taxes. It was valuable. It was just sitting there. Your grandmother wasn't even using it. It wasn't hers. I shot back, my voice rising. It was Lucy's. Rachel laughed. She's 11. My mom set her mug down with a soft clink. Emily, don't start. Don't start. I repeated, incredulous. You sold my daughter's cello. My dad leaned back, dismissive. It was a family asset. No, I snapped, my voice sharper now. It was set aside for Lucy. My grandma was clear about that. Rachel finally looked up, her eyes bright with manufactured annoyance. And my kids are what? Chopped liver. Ben and Olivia weren't even in the room, and somehow, they were still the main characters. My mom waved a hand vaguely toward the backyard. We're doing something nice for the children. She said the children, again, like she expected a round of applause. Ben and Olivia deserve space. They deserve. And Lucy doesn't. I cut her off. My dad rubbed his forehead, already tired of me being a person. Lucy will be fine with a student cello, he said, as if it was obvious. You can rent one.
Plenty of kids do.
Lucy will be fine. That's my family's favorite prayer. It means we did what we wanted, and we're not dealing with your feelings. I could feel my hands shaking. I forced them still on the counter. Where is it? I asked. Quieter now, a dangerous calm settling over me. Who did you sell it to? My dad shrugged.
Some collector guy.
Paid by wire. Quick sale. Of course. My mom's eyes sharpened. And before you get any ideas, you are not telling your grandmother. I stared at her, utterly floored. She doesn't need the stress, my mom said, voice clipped. She's settling in at her facility. Professionals are taking care of her. Let her have peace. You mean let you have peace? I countered. My dad's expression hardened. Don't make this about you. I laughed, once, sharp and humorless. It is about my kid. Rachel leaned forward, her voice sweet in that fake way that makes you want to check your wallet. Emily, honestly, you're always acting like Lucy is some tragic orphan.
She's fine.
She has you. The way she said you made it sound like a punishment. I turned back toward the hall. Lucy was still in the music room, standing in that empty corner, as if waiting for someone to tell her she mattered. I walked back to her, knelt down, and took her hands.
We're going home, I said.
Lucy nodded, without arguing. That was the worst part. She didn't even fight. She just folded, like she'd been trained for this. As we left, my mom called after me, "Emily, do not call your grandmother. Do you hear me?" I didn't answer, because I did hear her. I just didn't care anymore. And that's when I knew I was going to tell my grandma everything. That night, Lucy practiced on the battered student cello her teacher kept for emergencies. It sounded like a cardboard box with strings. Lucy didn't complain. She adjusted her posture, focused, tried again. And every time the sound came out thin and wrong, she blinked hard, as if trying to hold something inside. I stood in the doorway, pretending I was just casually watching, like this was normal, like my kid hadn't just been robbed. Lucy finally stopped, setting the bow down. "I can still practice," she said, careful, almost apologetic. "It's just harder." "I know," I said. She nodded, staring at her hands. Maybe great-grandma, maybe she didn't mean for it to be mine yet. I felt something inside me go very still. Lucy had spent weeks in that music room with my grandmother, her great-grandmother, learning in a way I couldn't give her. Not because I didn't love her. Love doesn't automatically come with talent. My grandma had it. Lucy had it too. It skipped me like the universe looked at my family and said, "Let's not put all the gifts in the same basket." My grandma used to sit beside Lucy, correcting her grip with 2 fingers and a knowing look. She'd say things like, "Your left hand is talking too loudly," which made Lucy giggle, then fix it anyway. She'd praise her the way kids need praising, specific and honest. Better. That was better. Not the empty kind. Not the kind that says, "Good job," while still checking your phone. Lucy felt seen with her in a house where she usually had to shrink because that was the pattern. In my parents' house, Ben and Olivia, Rachel's kids, could shout, spill juice, run through hallways like tiny kings and queens, and it was adorable. Kids being kids. They're so spirited. Rachel, her husband, and the kids were living there too, one of those temporary arrangements that had lasted long enough to grow roots. Lucy, meanwhile, was expected to be quiet, polite, grateful. If Lucy laughed too loudly, my mom would say, "Inside voice, sweetheart," with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. If Ben yelled, my dad would laugh and say, "He's got lungs on him." If Olivia demanded attention, Rachel would scoop her up like she was a celebrity. If Lucy needed anything at all, it was treated like an inconvenience. Lucy learned to take up less space the way other kids learn math. My grandma noticed. She didn't always intervene. She was still my mom's mom, and family politics are their own kind of landmine. But my grandma did something quieter. She carved out a space where Lucy didn't have to apologize for existing. That space was the music room. It made practical sense, too. My apartment wasn't exactly designed for antique instruments and long practice sessions. It was safe, clean, and mine, but small. Sound traveled. Neighbors complained. And a cello like Grandma's, and now Lucy's, wasn't something you left in a corner near the radiator, hoping for the best. So, we stored it there, in that controlled room, in the cabinet, with the little humidifier humming like a promise. And my grandma had been careful. Not just emotionally careful, but paperwork careful. She'd had the cello appraised, photographed, documented. She'd show me the file once, not because she wanted to brag, but because she wanted me to understand. "This is not just sentimental," she'd said, tapping the page. "It's valuable. People get strange around valuable things." I nodded because, yes, people got strange around valuable things. I just didn't think people meant my parents. My grandma had moved out less than a week ago, into a place my mom described as perfect and so much safer and so much less stress, which might have been true for my grandma. It was definitely true for my mom, because the move had been preceded by months of comments like, "This is getting hard," and "She needs professional care," and "It's not fair to all of us." All of us, meaning my mom, my dad, Rachel, and somehow never me, the one who actually showed up. My grandma didn't leave kicking and screaming. She left the way she did everything, with a straight spine and a quiet decision. But once she was gone, the energy in the house shifted. The last set of eyes that mattered had left the room, and my family did what they always did when no one could stop them. They took. Lucy went to bed early that night. She didn't ask to call my grandmother. She didn't ask to complain. She just hugged me tightly before she fell asleep, like she was holding herself together with my ribs. After she was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone. I kept thinking about the way my mom said, don't tell your grandmother. Not don't upset her. Not really. Just don't tell her. Like the truth was a weapon, and they expected me to keep it holstered for their comfort. I realized something then, and it wasn't pretty. I'd spent most of my life trying not to be difficult. I thought being easy was the same as being loved. It isn't. It's just easier for everyone else. And I wasn't going to teach Lucy that lesson. So, the next morning, I drove to my grandma's place. She lived in a bright, tidy apartment in an assisted independent living community that smelled like lemon cleaner and expensive hand soap. It wasn't depressing. It was controlled. There's a difference. A staff member at the front desk smiled and asked who I was visiting, as if my family hadn't just detonated itself. Margaret, I said. She said warmly. She's in the lounge. She's been expecting you. Of course she had. My grandma was in an armchair with a book in her lap, her glasses perched on the end of her nose like she was about to judge the author personally. She looked up the second I walked in. Sit, she said, her voice calm but firm. Your face is doing that thing. I sat down across from her. They did. I began, my voice tight. My grandma didn't flinch. She just waited. So I told her. I kept it simple. The missing cello, the pool excavation, the words my parents used, family asset. Lucy will be fine. Don't tell Grandma. My grandma listened without interrupting, the way people do when they're collecting evidence. When I finished, she closed her book slowly. And Lucy, she asked. She went quiet. I said. She asked if you changed your mind. My grandma's expression didn't crumple. It hardened, not into rage, but into clarity. She thought it was her fault. My grandma said softly. I nodded. My grandma exhaled through her nose. One sharp, decisive breath. Then she asked, when did you last see the file? What file? The cello documentation, she said. Appraisal, photographs, identifiers. I saw it months ago, I said, a flicker of hope sparking within me. You showed me. My grandma nodded. Good. She leaned forward slightly. Emily, do you have any texts about the pool? Any pictures? Anything that shows the renovation started right after I moved? I can screenshot Rachel's posts, I said, because of course Rachel had posted. Rachel could post her own funeral if the lighting was good enough. My grandma nodded. Do that. I stared at her. Grandma, are you okay? My grandma looked at me over her glasses. I am not the one who should be worried, she said. Then she reached for her phone. I'm going to make a call. I didn't ask who she was calling. My grandma had always had a way of keeping her cards close. My family treated that as sweet and old-fashioned. It wasn't. It was strategic. She made the call, spoke quietly, then hung up. I will handle it, she said. I blinked. How? My grandma gave me a small smile. Not with yelling, which in our family was basically a miracle. She reached across and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were warm, firm. Lucy is going to get her cello back, she said. My throat tightened. How do you know? My grandma's eyes sharpened. Because it was never theirs to sell. I froze. My grandma watched my face, like she was choosing how much to reveal. Not today, she said gently. Like she could read my thoughts. I will explain when it matters. She stood up. Go home. Be with your child. Let her practice. Let her feel normal where she can. What about my mom and dad? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My grandma's smile didn't reach her eyes this time. Let them enjoy their pool. I drove home feeling like I'd walked into a room where the air pressure had fundamentally changed. And then nothing happened. Not publicly, not immediately. Weeks passed. 6 give or take. Lucy practiced on the student cello and on a rental we'd scraped together after her teacher found one at a discount. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't hers. The sound didn't bloom the same way. Lucy adjusted anyway because Lucy was the kind of kid who adapted, even when she shouldn't have to. The worst part was that she didn't complain. She just got quieter. Meanwhile, my parents posted pictures of construction progress like they'd personally invented concrete. Rachel posted Olivia holding a tiny inflatable flamingo, Ben wearing goggles, with captions like, making memories, and worth every penny. No apology, no mention of the cello, just smiling faces and a giant hole in the ground that was rapidly filling with water. One night, the invite didn't come to me at all. It landed in the family group chat like a flyer taped to a pole. Barbecue. Saturday, 2 p.m. pool reveal. Bring a side if you're coming. No, hope you can make it. No, miss you. Just logistics. Because in my family, feelings are optional, but potato salad is mandatory. I stared at the screen, a cold fury building in my chest. Lucy glanced over my shoulder, her face blank. Are we going? I opened my mouth, and didn't have an answer yet. The next morning, my grandma called me.
We're going, she said.
I swallowed hard. Grandma, what are you doing? My grandma's voice was calm, utterly unshakable. I'm doing what I should have done earlier. I started to ask more, but she cut me off. Emily, she said, her voice softening just a fraction. I don't want Lucy watching you swallow this. My chest tightened. Okay. There was a pause. Then my grandma said, "It's in motion." In motion? I repeated, my heart kicking.
The cello, she said.
What do you mean? She just smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips, and said, "You'll find out soon enough." Saturday was hot in that oppressive way that makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet towel. Perfect pool weather. Perfect, look how great we're doing, weather. Lucy wore her swimsuit under her clothes because she's 11 and hope is stubborn. She didn't talk much on the drive over. Neither did I. When we pulled up to the house, cars lined the street. People I recognized from holidays, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. The kind of crowd my family loved because it made them feel important. The backyard looked like a brochure. Blue water shimmered under the sun. The stone deck was spotless. The pergola had string lights, like they'd watched one home improvement show and decided they were experts. Ben was already in the pool, splashing like a tiny shark. Olivia sat on a float with sunglasses on, because of course she did. Rachel was holding a drink and laughing loudly at something someone said, like she was hosting a talk show. My mom stood near the grill, with that "I am the matriarch" posture she practiced in mirrors. My dad hovered nearby, smiling like a man whose life choices had just been validated by chlorine. And then Lucy and I walked in. My mom's smile flickered, just a little, not because she was surprised we came, but because she was irritated we had the audacity. "Emily," she said, bright and fake. "You made it." "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice flat. Rachel looked Lucy up and down. "Hey." Lucy nodded politely, quietly, like she'd been trained. Ben cannonballed. Everyone laughed. Olivia squealed. Rachel beamed. Lucy stood beside me, her towel folded carefully in her hands, like she didn't know where to put herself. I watched her eyes drift over the pool, over the pergola, over the new loungers, over what her cello had turned into. Lucy swallowed hard. I put my hand on her shoulder. She leaned into it without looking at me. That's when I knew I wasn't here for revenge. I was here because my kid deserved to see what happens when you don't let people take from you and then demand gratitude. My dad clapped his hands. "All right, everyone, food's almost ready." My mom laughed. "And before we eat, we just want to say this has been a long time coming. We're so happy to finally have a backyard the kids can really enjoy." Applause. Rachel raised her glass. "To family," she chirped. Applause again. Lucy's fingers tightened around her towel. Then someone in the crowd said, "Where's Margaret? Isn't she coming?" My mom's smile tightened. "She's busy," she said quickly. Right on cue, the gate clicked open. I turned. My grandma walked in. She wasn't in a wheelchair. She didn't look frail. She wore a crisp blouse and slacks, and a calm expression that made the air feel colder, even in the stifling heat. Beside her was Andrew, her lawyer and a longtime friend, carrying a slim folder. The backyard went quiet in that way crowds do when they sense a shift, but don't know what kind yet. My mom's face went pale. My dad's smile froze. Rachel's mouth opened slightly, then closed. My grandma stepped forward, her eyes sweeping over the pool like she was assessing a poorly done paint job. "Well," she said pleasantly, "you've been busy." My mom forced a laugh. "Mom, this is a party." "I know," my grandma said. "That's why I came." She looked at me, then at Lucy. Lucy straightened a little, like her spine recognized safety. My grandma's gaze softened for a split second. Then she looked back at my parents. "I heard you sold the cello," my grandma said. My mom's lips pressed together. "We didn't want to upset you." My grandma held up a hand. "You didn't want consequences." The word hit like a stone dropped into water. My dad cleared his throat. "Let's talk about this privately." My grandma smiled, and it was not a warm smile. "Oh, Thomas," she said, "you've had plenty of private time." A nervous chuckle rippled through the crowd. Someone shifted their drink from one hand to the other. Someone else pretended to look at the grill. My grandma turned slightly, addressing the backyard the way you might address a room full of people at a small town meeting. "I won't keep you long," she said. "I know you're all here to swim." Rachel snapped, "This is insane." My grandma ignored her. She looked straight at my parents and said calmly, "The cello was." Everyone leaned in, even if they tried not to, held in trust for Lucy. The silence that followed was so sharp it felt like glass. My mom blinked. "What?" My grandma continued, her voice even. "I am the trustee. Lucy is the beneficiary. That cello was not a family asset. It was not yours to sell." My dad stared at her like she'd suddenly started speaking another language. Rachel's face flushed. "You can't." My grandma's eyes flicked to Rachel. "I can." Andrew stepped forward quietly and opened the folder. My grandma didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She kept her gaze on my parents because she wanted them to feel it. "I documented that instrument," she said. "Appraisal, photographs, serial identifiers, insurance, the works. Because I've been alive a long time and I've met people." She paused, her eyes twinkling with a cold fire. "Apparently, I'm related to some of them." A few people snorted. Dry humor does that. It slips under the skin while everyone is still deciding if they're allowed to laugh. My mom's voice shook. "We didn't know anything about a trust." My grandma nodded.
Correct. You didn't.
My dad finally found his voice. "Where is it?" My grandma's smile returned. "Safe." Lucy's head snapped up, hope flickering in her eyes. My grandma looked at her, her voice softening for a moment. "It was recovered this morning, after Andrew made a few calls and filed the report." Lucy's breath caught. Not a sob, not a scream, just a small sound like relief trying to escape. My grandma turned back to my parents. "You sold something you did not own. You took the money and you put it into..." She gestured lazily at the shimmering pool.
"This."
Rachel snapped. "It's for the kids." My grandma's gaze sharpened. "Lucy is a kid." Rachel's mouth opened.
Closed.
She looked at Ben and Olivia, splashing happily, like she wanted them to be a shield. They weren't. Andrew cleared his throat gently. "Margaret," he said quietly. My grandma nodded slightly. Andrew stepped toward my parents and Rachel. "I have documents for you." My mom stepped back, as if the papers might bite.
"No."
Andrew didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He held out the papers like a waiter offering a check no one wants to see. "Notice to vacate," he said calmly. 60 days. My mom stared at the papers like they were poisonous. My dad's face went from pale to gray. Rachel's voice went shrill. "You're kicking us out?" My grandma tilted her head. "You're acting surprised. That's the part one don't understand." My mom's hands shook. "Mom, you can't do this. This is my home." My grandma's expression stayed calm. "It is the house you live in." The difference in those sentences was a cliff. I felt Lucy press closer to my side. Rachel's eyes flashed. "This is because Emily..." "No," my grandma said, cutting her off, her voice suddenly like steel. "This is because you sold a child's instrument and poured the money into a pool like it was Monopoly." My dad's voice cracked. "We improved the property." My grandma's eyes narrowed slightly. "You improved your comfort with stolen money in a house you don't even own." My mom looked like she might faint. The backyard, moments ago a party, was now full of people who suddenly remembered they had places to be. Drinks lowered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone's laugh, too late, then stopped abruptly. Lucy whispered, "Mom." I looked down. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She was holding it in, the way kids do when they don't want to make adults uncomfortable. I squeezed her shoulder. Then I looked at my parents, at Rachel, at the pool, at the way they'd built something shiny for Ben and Olivia, and expected Lucy to clap for it. And I said, not loudly, but clearly enough that anyone listening could hear, "Lucy isn't second tier. Family." My mom's face twisted. "Emily, no," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not doing this today." Rachel scoffed. "So what? Lucy gets everything." I laughed, sharp and dry. She was getting a cello. My grandma took a step toward Lucy, her voice softening once more. "Sweetheart, you didn't lose it. It was taken." Lucy's lip trembled. "I thought I did something wrong." My grandma's eyes flashed with anger, so quick it was almost invisible. "You did nothing wrong." Andrew held the papers steady. "My dad didn't take them. My mom didn't take them." Rachel finally snatched hers like she could rip reality in half if she tore hard enough. My grandma looked at my parents. 60 days, she said again. "You will leave." My dad's voice came out thin. "You can't be serious." My grandma's smile was small and cold. "Try me." And that was it. Not yelling, not a meltdown, just a line drawn in permanent ink. As the backyard started to break apart, people quietly gathering their things, children being called out of the pool, relatives avoiding eye contact, My mom stood frozen. Rachel's face was red. She hissed something at my dad. My dad didn't respond. Ben and Olivia kept splashing for a few more minutes because kids don't understand adult consequences until the adults force them to. Lucy watched them, then looked at my grandma. "Do I get it back?" she whispered. My grandma nodded. Yes. Lucy let out a breath I didn't realize she'd been holding for 6 weeks. And I realized something too. My parents' faces had gone pale because my grandma had finally done the one thing my family couldn't survive. She stopped letting them pretend. Ending, Lucy got her cello back. It arrived the next day in a hard case that looked like it had traveled through several hands and regretted all of them. My grandma opened it with Lucy, like it was a ceremony. Lucy ran her fingers over the wood like she was touching something alive. She didn't say much. She just hugged my grandma so tightly, I saw my grandma close her eyes for a second, like she was letting herself feel it now that the danger had passed. My parents, meanwhile, discovered a fun fact about selling something you don't own. People want their money back. The buyer came after them the way you'd expect. Angry, embarrassed, and not interested in my mom's, we didn't know routine. The words repayment plan entered my parents' vocabulary like a disease. They couldn't pay it all at once. Most people can't, especially not people who pour stolen money into concrete and chlorine. 60 days went faster than they expected. My mom tried bargaining. My dad tried guilt. Rachel tried rage. My grandma didn't move. They packed up their life in a house they'd treated like it was theirs and moved into something smaller, something cheaper, something that didn't have a pool. Rachel and her husband didn't end up saving my parents. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. Rachel suddenly remembered how to distance herself when consequences showed up. One minute it was, we all agreed. And the next it was, I told you this was a bad idea. Families like mine have a special talent for rewriting history on the fly. Ben and Olivia adjusted. Kids always do. Lucy adjusted too, but in a different way. She started speaking up more. Small things, at first. Actually, I was sitting there. I don't like that joke. No, I'm not okay with that. The first time she did it in front of my mom's mouth tightened like she'd tasted something bitter.
Good.
My grandma updated her plans after everything happened, quietly, thoroughly, the way she does.
She didn't give speeches about it.
She just slid a folder across my kitchen table one evening and said, Andrew's handling the paperwork. I'm putting the house into a trust. I'll be the trustee. You'll be the beneficiary. So, it's protected now, and it's yours in the end.